What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to talk about something that I believe can make a huge difference in how your music sounds. And that's stereo placement. What should be mono, what should be stereo, and how do we use the space in a smart and intentional way. Before we continue, I just want to make that I just finished my 5th studio album. It's called The First Vibration. It's gonna come out on Sounds of Akasha at the end of June, so stay tuned for this one. And as well, the sound design course is still at a discounted price on 190 euros. And back to the video. After doing a lot of mixing and mastering for a lot of different clients, I've noticed some common mistakes, and most of them come down to a poor decision in stereo placement. And honestly, these are the things that can make a track sound either tight or professional, or flat and weak. So let's start from the basics. So when we talk about the kick and the bass, people usually think these are the low frequency elements, they should be mono. And yes, that's true from a certain perspective. If we are talking strictly about the sub and low frequencies, like below 200, then yes, mono is the way to go. But there is a thing, in Psytrance and similar genres, our kicks often have a big punch in the mids and sometimes even in the high frequencies. So if we make them fully mono, we might be killing some of the magic. For example, I sometimes layer hi-hat over the kick, not the one that lives in the sub-range, but something short, snappy, and sometimes I even add a short burst of the reverb on top of that kick. And that small stereo detail on top of the kick makes it feel more alive, because in nature we never really hear mono, especially in the high frequencies. So sound reflects, it warps around us, it's stereo by default. Now if you close your eyes and someone plays a sine wave at the 50 Hz in the room, you won't be able to tell where it's coming from. That's because low frequencies are always impossible to localize. Our ears need timing and phase differences to localize the sound, and low frequencies just don't give us enough of that information. That's why the low end of your mix should always be mono. Kick sub mono, bass sub mono. I even go a step further and cut the sides below 200 on my master just to be sure. I throw an EQ on the master bass and I put a low cut on the side channel. This way I'm keeping the center solid and preventing phase issues on a big sound systems. But now when we move to other elements like things like snare, percussion, hi-hats, it's a different story. Let's take the snare for example. If you make it mono, especially in the tracks with wide leads and atmospheres, the snare can disappear in the mix. It just won't cut through. So what I usually do, I keep the low mid sometimes of the snare in mono, but I make the top of the snare in stereo. You can do this with layering, with stereo enhancement tools, or even with a short reverb. But be careful, if you create stereo with a delay-based tools, and the delay between the left and right channel is too big, you can mess up the transient. If one ear hears the snare a few milliseconds later than the other, it can sound smeared. So I keep that stereo delay under and up to 5 milliseconds for percussive elements. That way I keep the stereo width but without messing up the punch. When it comes to the bass lines, I actually do spread them. Not the low end, but the mids and highs. I've been using this plugin called MStereoSpread from Melodic Production, which lets me to set a frequency limit. I usually set it to around 250 Hz, so everything below stays in mono and everything above spreads out. And I noticed something important. When my kicks and basses are both fully mono, it somehow feels stiff. Even though it's technically clean, it sounds flat. So adding a little bit of stereo info on top of the bass line, not crazy wide, just a subtle, helps me to enjoy the process more. It feels more alive. Now let's talk about the hi-hats. For me, hi-hats should always be stereo. In 2025, with the sound systems we have, I don't see any reason why your top end should be in mono. Unless you are going for some specific trick, like one hi-hat on the left channel and another on the right channel, which is cool, but that's a creative decision. What I often see that people send me the stem is a mono open hat. That is one of the biggest mistakes. In a mix full with wide arps, ping-pong delays, reverbs, having a mono open hat is like putting a narrow dot in the middle of the colorful painting. It just doesn't belong. So when I talk about the stereo, I don't really think in terms of left and right anymore. It's more about the center and on the side, like mid and side. So kick and bass are always in the center, that's their home. I might add a little stereo sparkle, a short burst of a reverb on the kick's top end, and spread that bassline pluck a bit to the sides, but the main energy stays firmly in mono. And now, since the center is already taken by the kick and the bass, I always keep other elements like single shot sounds, atmospheres, leads and melodies off to a side. I don't collapse their stereo width or narrow them down, I let them stay wide, but I'm very intentional about what's happening in the middle. And that's why I always compress the center of those elements. On my buses, for single shot sounds, atmospheres, melodic elements, I apply mid-only compression. The goal is to tame up the center, make space for the kick in the bass and avoid overcrowding. But on the side, I leave full dynamics. I want the side to breathe, to stay alive, to carry that width and movement without being squashed. Now, just one important note here, and if you want to truly hear the shape of the stereo width, you need a proper monitoring setup. Don't expect too much from a low-range audio interfaces or budget sound cards. They often lack the capacity of revealing the real depth of the stereo field. This is exactly why I use Apogee converters, combined with the dangerous music debug summing mixer. Even though RME Fireface 800 has a really good digital to audio converters, my Apogee setup gives me enormous stereo width and clarity that I just cannot get from anything lower end. This combination makes a huge difference when placing elements in the mix and understanding how wide they really are. And of course, there are some specific subgenres of electronic music that lean more towards the mono feel, especially those that aim for an old school or analog vibe. Genres like new acid house or even certain types of a deep progressive psytrance often have that mono-ish character. And that's usually because they are made using the analog sounding synths and processed through analog gear, which naturally gives that tighter and more centered sound. And that's totally fine, it is a stylish choice. If you are going for that kind of the psychoacoustic effect, where the whole track feels more glued and hypnotic through its mono nature, then it makes sense to follow that direction. But if you are aiming for a modern, polished production with the clarity, depth and stereo movement, then everything I talked in this video will bring great results. Keep the low end in mono, control the center, let the side breathe, and you will end up with a powerful, clean and spacious mix. Thank you very much for watching, I hope I gave you some insight and feel free to drop a questions or thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one, bye!